Hello and welcome back to the Banking Revolution. I'm Liz Lumley of The Banker. And this afternoon, we are going to be looking at, can open banking work for all? As we know, open banking was launched 3 years ago over in Europe and in the UK to great fanfare. Open banking initiatives have popped up around the world, and many people are looking at its potential, how it's being used and whether it actually delivers what it has promised, which is increasing competition and improving services for customers. So we have a wonderful panel here for you today, which will have this great discussion. So I'm going to bring them on so that they can introduce themselves. So can I bring on Mateus, please, now? Please introduce yourself briefly.
Good afternoon, Liz. Thank you for having me on that show. It's a big pleasure. So my name is Matthias Kröner. I'm a co-founder of Feeder Bank. The other day, like 11 years ago, actually, we started the Feeder exercise. Before that, I had the opportunity to co-found another bank, which was a discount broker in the mid-90s. And today I'm a very proud member of a team that founded TradeLight Solutions, which is operating at the intersection of video games and financial markets. So, looking forward for a great discussion.
Excellent. Carmela, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hello to all. I'm Carmela Gomez, and I am working at BBVA Group as a head of open banking. I've been part of BBVA Group in the last 15 years, so many different things to do here, and glad to be with you today.
Excellent. And Leonardo, please introduce yourself to the panel.
Yes, hello everyone. Thanks for the invitation. And I'm Leonardo, the CEO of ANK, A-N-K, which is bank without the B. We are part of Itaú Unibanco Group, the largest private bank in Latin America. We're running a fintech that has 1 year old, and we are embracing the open finance concept. So I'm really looking forward for this conversation.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Before we get into our questions, as you know, this is a live event and the audience is welcome to put in questions for our panel. Please put it in the chat function. I can't promise that we will get to every single question, but if you make your comments provocative and interesting, they get more of a chance of being on air. So I'm going to start off with my first question, which is kind of a question about open banking. When it was launched over here in Europe and the UK, kind of an offshoot of the Payment Services Directive 2 and the CMA Directive here in the UK. This question has been asked almost since the day open banking was born. Has it delivered what it promised at the start? So, Mateus, I'm going to start with you. Has open banking given us what it promised?
Well, as you said, Liz, this question, we had day one of open banking, and day 1+1, actually, we had the question, did it deliver? So I think, and there you can sense already a little bit my perspective is, hey, guys, we've done traditional incumbent banking for the last, 70 years. And now once you have an innovation going on, you want to see all the successes in 1 day or 1 week or in whatever kind of a short-term distance, actually. So I think, so first of all, if we kind of split it up a bit by customers, industry, and the regulator, I think, first of all, the regulator and the regulator is driving our market. So this is why I integrate those guys into our equation. So the regulator, I think, fulfilled a promise saying, okay, we want to increase competition. And you could see how nervous incumbent banks did become actually by introducing PSD, whatever version, and how nervous they become and how much of a kind of backroom lobbying they started to slow it down and to make it as regional as possible, not agreeing on single standards by all European standards, but country by country, and so on and so forth. So this is clearly telling me that there is something very powerful on the way, first of all. Second, if we look to this out of a customer view, well, the customer actually doesn't care whether this is driven, whether a specific solution is driven by PSD 2, 3, or whatever, or whether the customer, it's only looking at it like, is this a use case which is valid for me? Is this useful for me? Is this does that ease in my life? Is it secure? In particular, in Germany, we have a lot of customers asking about data protection, and this is it. PSD XYZ, whatever. I don't care. I don't know. So convince me with a use case. I would say this is the customer perspective.
No, it is. It's always interesting about the discussions around open banking. There's this sort of insider fintech nerd discussion, and then what people on the street, the consumers, which this is supposed to benefit, and their viewpoint, and sort of looking at it from both angles is really interesting. I want to bring in the European bank now. So, Carmela, I really love to know your views about the past 3 years of open banking.
So my view is a bit particular, maybe, and I have, if I look at Europe, I can say it has not delivered what was promised. Clearly, I mean, we are on the path of, and probably in the next years we will see a strong evolution on this, as Matthias was saying. Why? In many cases, because regulation cannot come to the last mile of what consumers are looking for. And so what regulation tried to do, which is normal and allowable, is setting a level playing field for every player. Based on that, the regulation is so wide that it's going to take time for everyone to understand what's their potential and what's the framework to work within. But regulation is not all. I mean, the market is the one driving, and the customer behaviors and needs are the ones that would be driving what's necessary to develop from each of the players. No? Either niche players, either big banks that are delivering many financial services, different ones. The perspective on each player is completely different. It's not the same if you are a fintech that you are trying to cover a specific niche, let's say credit or cards or whatever, or if you are a bank providing many services where the picture is completely different. No? So what is true is that not only in Europe, but in Asia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Japan, Australia, United States, all of us have clear rules to follow. And if you look at that in Asia, it has been driven by regulation. In Europe also, in the United States, it has been driven by the market. But open banking is a reality. And now we are seeing Mexico and Colombia and Brazil developing the regulation, which will bring comfort and which will bring a clear, let's say, framework to every player to follow. No? So, I mean, regulation is there, but it's not all. And so the question, it has delivered what was promised? No. The answer is no, because there's still a lot of roads to go through to our final destiny.
Interesting. I'm happy to know when that road, if the road even ends. But I mean, I'm glad that you brought up, the different, areas around the world that are experiencing open banking, some through a regulatory mandate and some market led, and so that's where I'm going to turn to Leonardo. How does open banking kind of take form in regions where there isn't this regulatory push and it's more market led? What has been your experience?
Yeah, exactly. So in Latin America, we are based in Argentina, in Buenos Aires, and we've started in Argentina, and we plan to expand. But currently in Argentina, we don't have an open banking regulation. Probably will come soon. So building on what Matthias and Carmela were saying about the needs of the user and the value to the user, we build back some sort of open finance solution from the user need back to the product. And what we offer now in Argentina, for example, is based on the infrastructure that was already in instant payments, the ability for users to send money from banks to fintechs and from fintechs to bank, linking all their accounts in a single app. And that was not based on a regulation, but rather on a user need or a pain point that we found, where when it comes to sending money instantly in Argentina. No? So we built from the user need and the user pain point, and that's, I think, probably a good way to think about the value that will deliver. The regulation needs to happen, because I think the user pains and needs are there. The switching cost for people to move from a bank to another bank or from a bank to a fintech are still quite high. And to finalize my intervention here, we've seen in Argentina two ways. One is the one that I described with ANC, where we some sort of leverage the current infrastructure to simulate or to try to deliver an open banking experience while we don't have the regulation. And the other initiative, it was a complete private banks initiative where all the major banks in Argentina, they put together a new company and they built infrastructure that allows some sort of open banking experience. But it was a complete private initiative. No, it was not driven by regulation.
Interesting. I mean, I really liked when Camilla was talking about that open banking is this journey. And there's a question from the audience. I'm going to kind of bring it into my next question, where they wanted to look at what were some of the expectations of open banking before going into what are some of the barriers, what are some of the journeys. So, I mean, my next question is really looking at what are the barriers to understanding the full potential of open banking. And I'm going to go to Mateus first for this, but maybe you can include a little bit about what was expected. What was expected 3 years ago, and what are some of those barriers while we're walking down this open banking journey?
So Liz, the question would be the barrier for whom? So I guess the barrier for the banks, I guess, is what we look at it first of all. So when open banking or PSD or API banking actually occurred, and to be honest, or to be kind of thinking back, with FIDA, we started this as much as I can remember, in 2013, we published the first APIs to integrate and deliver data from the inside to the outside and vice versa. We did this because we wanted to enrich the customer experience by consolidating various data points, for instance, into the feeder account. And that was a kind of predecessor approach, actually. Before then, PSD2 came along and of course, then regulated the payment activities and regulated who is allowed to do what on this behalf. The objective, as much as I recall it, was really to say, listen, the one who has the better customer access and the better customer understanding should take care of that, and in particular the customer, in order to improve actually the competition, and by improving competition, improve the value proposition for the customer. Actually, that is, I would say, really the starting point to that whole journey. And yes, we have a European look now, and thanks to Leonardo, we have a LATAM look to this now. I can add an Australian look to this, who embraced. I can tell you, the rest of the world actually looked very, very interested to this European development, and it was one of the very seldom times when I've had conversations and presentations in Singapore, and everybody in Asia then said, listen, this is such a great development you have over there in Europe. You're really doing something great. Let us take that as a blueprint, actually. Let us copy that. And then they started to develop it even further, while we are stuck in a discussion whether this was useful or not. But this is, let me say it like this is so much European, and guys in England and the UK, I include you to this, right? So, and then we come to the point of difficulty or hurdles. I would say, all in all, it's a cultural topic and the decision maker level in banks. That, to me, would be the single biggest point actually to point at. Or not only banks, but also others that might be in the position to benefit from PSD2. Allow me to give a short example. I've been advising a project, and they wanted to deliver a very easy view on your carbon footprint and how you improve your carbon footprint, actually by consolidating your account data, by having a look to that data and translating it into your carbon footprint and your carbon behavior, right? This was not executed because the decision makers had been afraid of any public discussion regarding data protection. Now, to me, a very interesting observation, actually, because totally missing the point of what we're speaking here. So you would have had all the tools in your hand, but you do not do it, not because because maybe 2% of the customers would complain unjustified about data protection because they do not know about PSD2, and this is why the decision makers more or less kind of killed the project. This is the problem to me.
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to move on to Carmela now. I mean, I saw you smiling a bit when Matthias was talking about the European, while the rest of the world is getting on with open banking. What are your views on some of the barriers that we're experiencing?
Well, before moving into the barriers, I think that what PSD2 and the regulators promised was to regulate something that was already happening in the market. Due to the technology evolution, in some cases, companies as fintechs were providing services to clients based, for example, in things like screen scraping or other techniques that were not secure. So what the regulators were trying to provide was a secure data sharing and a secure payments initiation framework for those companies to be able to compete and to develop all the full experience for their different clients. I completely agree with Matthias on the one who has the better customer experience is the one that is going to keep the client. So based on that, the regulators brought something that would make that secure. The problem was that developing that, and that comes to the barriers that I see to develop the full potential of open banking, are costly. I think that if I have to think in barriers, I would say four. The first one is leadership, the second one is legacy, the third one is security, and the fourth one is trust. Being leadership and legacy, probably something more related to incumbents, to banks, where the leadership was seeing the threat of maybe other competitors coming into the market, but also the business case being costly due to the legacy transformation, which is something that we need to consider. Transforming all these, it's a long journey and it's a costly journey. So those two barriers are still there for many entities. And then we have security and trust, which was part of what the regulators wanted to regulate. Being security one of the main concerns for the users, and being trust the pivot around which all the advice and all the data treatment to provide better services to the customer will be. No? And building that trust and building the right security probably are also some barriers that we will still need to overcome.
Interesting. So, Leonardo, I'm going to move on to you. I mean, you've heard both Mateus and Carmela went through a lot of examples of the barriers they're seeing. What are you seeing down in Latin America?
Well, I would need to echo many of the things that were told, but when it comes to incumbents, really the lack of long-term view in terms of where the user needs and trends are going, and rather focusing on short term, and the inability to innovate and to disrupt themselves before it's too late. And I know it's not the focus of this panel, but I need to bring it up. While we are talking about regulation of open banking and the ability for banks to innovate, with the technology that emerged a few years ago already of blockchain and decentralized finance, users are already leveraging that technology to use it as some sort of open banking, open finance ecosystem. So the trend is here to stay, and I think it's to the banks and to the fintechs to adapt, and even to a fintech. No, I'm running a fintech. We might be disrupted even faster than the banks with blockchain and decentralized finance. So I would say regulation, of course, in our case in Latin America, we still need that, and that's a barrier. But I think most importantly is the ability to innovate for incumbents and even for new entrants. Another barrier. Yep.
Interesting. I mean, we sort of touched on this a little bit earlier in the discussion, and this is this idea that if a lot of open banking is supposed to benefit the consumers, what is the consumer's understanding of what open banking is, and do they even need to understand what open banking is, as opposed to the people that inside the industry, and then the language and the words that we use. I'm going to go to Carmela first for this. Do you think the public cares what open banking is, or do they more care about how it might benefit them?
Definitely not. I mean, final clients don't care about if it is open banking or open finance or whatever maybe. What they are concerned about is what service will make their lives easier. They want to bank even more than before, but they want to bank wherever and whenever they need that. And not only whenever, but in a way that is integrated in what they are doing. So they don't want to come out of the real estate website, come to a bank, check what type of mortgage can I get, for which amount, etc. They would like to have everything together in the same journey. I look for house, and then something that I need to do if I want this house is pay for it. How can I pay for it? What are my options? Tailored to the house I'm looking, to my situation, my personal situation, etc. And based on that, we will then be able to define which data I would be willing to share to make that journey easier for me. No? But they don't care if this is open banking or whatever. What they care is my journey is going to be easier or not. No? And based on that, then they will understand which are the nuances of doing all together within their journey in probably in places or in spaces which are not provided by financial entities.
Yeah, so I'll bring in Leonardo for this. I mean, in your part of the world, is it a concern that the public understand what open banking is, or do they even need to?
No, not at all. I agree with Carmela that at the end, um, users increasingly are looking to consume financial services, where they spend most of their time and using the applications in their phone that they mostly use. And I think if you look at what happened with the technology, starting to disrupt financial services, and we compare that with other industries like commerce or entertainment, where, for example, in music streaming completely changed the industry. The consumer at the end started to consume again music in a different way without understanding what was happening behind, and the whole change in value that happened with that disruption. So with more offering of financial service products with the lower entry barriers that technology produce, the user has much more options at a lower cost and better value, but they need a way to consume that in a single place, or in the place at the right moment. And I think open banking, open finance allows for that. But yeah, who cares about the name and the regulation when it comes to a user perspective? It's about the experience. And yeah, we fintechs in general try to bring that to the table and try to again build back from the user need and user pain point rather than from the regulation or what we already have in place.
Interesting. I think when on our next panel, we'll bring some people who work in the music industry to talk about streaming music for another topic. But I know that Mateus has some views on this. What do you think? Do the public need to know all the ins and outs from open
Liz,
banking?
let me say it like this. If I only could consume services I really understand, as you phrased it, it would be a limited amount of services or products I only could consume. So speaking for a country that stands for car manufacturing, would we think that people understand what the platform is in car building actually, and how relevant this is and how good it is to save costs on the one side, but to make it as many as possible different types of a car actually? No, we don't. People just walk into that store, whatever way they do it, and they just buy it. And as Leonardo said, on Word, do we care whether it's a good content or not because it's written on a WordPress platform? Do we care about the goods being sold because they're sold on Shopify? Do we care about the games that are created on a Unity platform, which is something like a role model for our trade light solutions? We don't. I think, as Camila said it, the customer wants to know easy journey, easy access, trusted gateway, so to say, trusted partner. And all to this is, which means at the end of the day, open banking more than ever is forcing a great UI, a great user experience, actually, user interface, and a great branding. By the way, this is essential. And then I think you can make the max out of it. And then you come to open banking, open finance, open data, and you need to kind of understand and harvest that dynamics, and then you will be a winner.
Excellent. We're going to move on to talk a little bit about data and privacy, because I know that was mentioned earlier. There's actually a question that came through. So excuse me while I just sort of read it. Turn away from the camera. It says, holistic and democratized financial wellness seems like the goal of open finance. How can this be possible without consumer data rights and digital identity for all? Whenever people talk about open banking and open finance here, obviously the data and privacy issues come up. Matthias, you already sort of mentioned this, but are sort of these big brother concerns overblown, and why do they persist, or should they persist? Are they underblown? Who does this benefit? Lots of questions I've asked here, which is not ideal, but looking at data and privacy and a lot of these issues that might concern people on the street. So I'm going to go back to you, Matthias. Who does this idea benefit when we talk about open banking?
So data protection, actually, again, it was the European Data Protection Regulation. Actually, Europe again did something which acted as a role model for the rest of the world. I can tell you, these are exactly the two initiatives the world did envy us for us. It's for actually, that was the one was open banking, PSD2, and the other one was data protection. And again, I come back to Asia because I have a lot of contacts there. They really had a close look to this and again copied that, or let me say it more positive, got inspired by that and taking it over. So yes, of course, that must be secure. I'm a bit disillusionized, if that is an English word, when it comes to democratizing finance and so on. Because believe me, when we founded Feeder, even DAB Bank, the first bank I co-founded, we've been driven very much by this democratization, actually, and by breaking up finance, by increasing financial education and supporting financial literacy and all that stuff, financial well-being and so on. Well, as said, I'm a bit disillusionized on this development. In particular, seeing that that majority of people still jump on the most expensive products, that there was no strong customer movement from expensive offerings or banks to more cost-efficient ones. That even fintech banks came up and offered insane expensive solutions you never had before. So I would say I wouldn't buy too much into this ethical or impactful thing anymore, because I see that the customer behaves maybe differently. Still, the option is there, right? And data protection, all other components need to be a hygiene factor to this anyhow. Shouldn't be a discussion at all.
So I'm going to move on to Carmela now. To get your views on kind of the data and privacy issue around open banking. What do you think?
I think that reality shows that we tend to perform our daily activities in different ecosystems, and technology has made possible all of this. But this also means that we have a digital print and a digital identity, which has become not only part of our own identity, but part of our way of life. No? And all this identity and footprint, the digital footprint that we leave behind us, belongs to us. So no one should be using that without our permission, no? Let's say. And that's where I think that the regulators can benefit and can make the final user feel secure, no? And start trusting to whom they lend those data, that digital identity, um, in exchange of what. So I think that there's part that the regulation is setting, let's say, the framework for the user to feel safe. And the second, it's part of the companies that are offering services to the user to be very, very clear. I am asking you to share this kind of data with me because I am going to do exactly this with those data. And based on that, I'm going to offer you something that is interesting for you. Where the threat or where the concern come is when you are asked on a very difficult way to understand, which I think can be much transparent or much easier to understand for the consumer, in terms of you are, don't know, giving me all this data for 5 or 6 things that the normal user is not able to understand in legal terms. No? So there's where the concern comes. What are these people doing with my data? And then there's also a lot of companies which business model is based on data, big data, small data, private data, whatever, but it's based on data. We all have the big names on our heads, but there are also many more that are doing business with that. No? So, and we are all afraid of when someone is providing me a free service, what I am selling is my data, no, my personal data, and how secure that's it. So having that regulated, I think it's good for the user. What I feel is that, for example, in the financial services, this regulation has gone beyond the something that is normal, no? And while in other areas where data is also the amount of data that you have from a user, being their don't know, gas company, is also very big. And that's data that should also be, the user should also be able to share in order to get some other services. No? So I think that although the regulation has regulated the privacy around financial data, this needs to be extended to other sectors in order to be valuable, really valuable for the companies to be able to offer the client a more holistic view of their lives, not only their financial lives, but their lives. No? So, and then sharing should be at the foundation of this transformation of open banking into open finance, let's say, which gives an extreme value to the concept of embedded finance. I mean, it's, let's say, I like to call this the secret sauce that empowers any company to offer products directly to their customers in a contextual way, and making them feel secure and comfortable. So it's part of the regulators and part of the ones offering the services that need to be very clear and transparent.
Well, I'm going to stay with you for the next question because I'm going to save the open finance question as a final question for all three of you. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about regulation, and we talked about it in and out of our discussion on this panel. The UK and Europe, this was a regulatory mandate. This was a directive which causes banks to comply rather than embrace of open banking initiatives. Do you think that's true, Camilla? I mean, is there a difference between complying and embracing?
It's a difference. There's a difference between comply and embrace, definitely. And for example, in our case, in the case of BBVA, we comply first. We comply, obviously, but after that, we embrace the philosophy. No, so not only in terms of going into partnerships with companies that can provide embedded services in their websites or in their offerings, but also we embrace so much the open banking, open finance philosophy that I can bring some examples. For example, today, clients that are not BBVA clients can use the BBVA app to check all their balances in other banks and or to initiate payments and experience the BBVA flavor, no? The BBVA way of doing. We have a very promising app. We have received many awards. So if you wanna try, if you wanna check how it looks, which things you would be able to do there, we offer that even for non-clients. You don't have to become a BBVA client, and you can use our services. No, so I mean, we embrace the philosophy as far as that. No, so what else I can say? I mean, for us, it's a sustainability pillar. No, I mean, in terms of financial inclusion, it's much easier for in countries where a big amount of a big chunk of the population is not banked yet. It brings a big possibility, no? I mean, however, whatever you invest in marketing is not gonna reach people that think that you are not for them. But if you go through a partnership with someone that they trust, and a good example that I like to bring into life is Solvers, which is a partnership that we have in Mexico. Solvers is a website where you offer your services for house repairing, maintenance, cleaning, etc. And through Solvers, we offer an account opening, we offer advice, we offer some first steps of being financial inclusive. No? So it brings help also to people that think that maybe banking is not for them, which is not true. I mean, banking is for everyone. Everyone has financial needs. No? So we've gone beyond what's regulation, and we are convinced that the right road is that one.
So I'm going to bring Mateus in on this because this is sort of the further regulation conversation. I know you're making comments on our internal chat about regulating data in other sectors and the massive amounts of data that consumer apps like Facebook have on us. What are your views on this? If you want to go into a little bit more detail.
Yeah. I like that discussion actually regarding should I embrace it or should I be compliant only? I would say that first of all that counts for the banks, yes, because we discussed banking, but as you already indicated this, it's definitely it's also beyond banking, and I think one serious point of bankers and decision makers out of banks we have to take really serious is why should I comply to a PSD2 alike or open banking alike regulation, which means I need to deliver my the customer's data to somebody else while others wouldn't, and it's kind of finger pointing into other sectors and verticals. I would really say is absolutely right. First of all, why do I, as a bank, of course, need to take care of all this in a very particular way, while others are using my data against me? And you mentioned one of the names that is ongoingly in the news, and nothing is happening about that. So obviously you have some areas of total anarchy on the one side, while you have areas of overregulation on the other side. And I think this absolute unbalance, this absolutely asynchrone status needs to be healed. First of all. Second, then also we need to now finally ensure that the customer is owning his or her data. I own my data. This means I pull my data from you whenever I want. I think if we once and forever come to that point, the trust in all those regulations will be much stronger than anything else. And this is then finally also coming to the point to say you need to be compliant. If you only want to let others pull the data, then you need and must be compliant, because this is the name of the game and those are the rules. But if you want to understand the market potential, and if you want to deliver a superb customer experience, then you need to embrace it. And this is the difference.
I'm gonna bring in. Thank you very much for that. I'm gonna bring in a question from the audience, only because it seems inevitable that someone would bring up decentralized finance, and this is a slightly provocative question. Open banking isn't open banking not irrelevant now, given expected developments in decentralized finance? Does anyone want to pop up and answer that question? Yeah, go for it, Camilla.
Okay, so I mean, for me, decentralized finance is something that can happen on the client life in many ways, no? And what I think is that open banking is not irrelevant, but on the contrary, necessary for that to happen, no? Because in many cases, that decentralized finance, what means is that what you are doing is something that you are doing based on where the customer journey is happening. And there's where open banking becomes a really critical enabler for that to happen.
Interesting. So we've
Yeah,
got. Go on. No,
I
go
think
on. No, please answer that one. Go for
sorry,
it.
Liz. Yeah, Camilla, absolutely right. And I think, actually, if we would have decentralized finance only, yes, you're absolutely right. Then I would not maybe need open banking. But as long as I have whatever kind of data collection points, that data I could use from actually, I need to have open banking as well. So I think it's not a yes, no, or black and white answer. It's just introducing us to the increasing variety of options for the future to break up silos, to bring light into where only darkness have been so far, if I may say so. But again, that should count for all and everybody, not only banking. Absolutely serious on that.
Interesting. So we've only got a few more minutes of our discussion, and I wanted to bring Leonardo back in, unless you want to make a comment about decentralized finance. I don't want to leave you out. But I wanted to look at, when we've been talking about open banking for a long time, and that here in the UK and Europe means kind of a retail account, a current account. But now there's wider discussions around embedded finance and open finance. Is that where we're actually going to see the promise of this open world when we look wider and look at open finance initiatives? So Leonardo, I don't know whether you want to give a comment on that.
Yeah, no, I rather like to talk about open finance than banking, because for decades we have um, the competitive advantage of banking being having a large distribution networks through branches. And as a user, the only option that I have to consume financial services was a single entity providing the products. That was the branch that was next to home. That, of course, it's completely gone with technology disruption and with, of course, regulation as well. But at the end, it's about open finance, no? And the entities providing the services will be banking in some cases, which is from a fintech perspective, I think they definitely have a role in the future, and there's trust and regulation that needs, some protection that needs to happen. But as I think Carmela said, also it's embedded finance and the touch points of the users, and when the user need in the exact moment that it needs to consume financial services is probably embedded in some other experience. So it's open finance, and that open finance mentality will include also DeFi, will include decentralized finance. Why not? So yeah, it's open finance and not open banking for us.
So with a little over a minute to go, Carmela, do you have any sort of final thoughts about the wider world of open finance and its promise?
Well, I think that the customer is going to teach us where to go. I mean, as usual, no, the customer has the right to consume our services. We are here for them. We in BBA are obsessed with the customer experience, and I think that should be the main center. Being obsessed for the customer experience, not only through our own tools, but also through third-party partnerships, which can provide a better customer journey for the consumers to obtain their financial needs.
Wonderful. So, Mateus, 30 seconds. You want to give a final word?
Yes, 30 seconds. I think so. The route is going down open finance, which means at the end of the day, open data, because it's not only finance what we talk out of a customer's perspective. But again, even more important, I must own my data. That means I must be in charge for that. And I decide who's having my data and who hasn't. I think this is a very strong prerequisite to the whole development we're speaking about.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The three of you. This has been a wonderful and interesting discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.